Alexander Hawthorne was a man whose life seemed to be sculpted from gold itself. Born into wealth and privilege, he had never known want, never felt the pangs of ordinary struggle. His mansion, perched atop the city's highest hill, gleamed like a jewel in the sunlight, a fortress of opulence and extravagance. Crystal chandeliers hung from ceilings so high that one could almost lose sight of the stars above, and every room was adorned with art and furniture that whispered the history of wealth and refinement. Alexander's name was known in the most exclusive circles, and wherever he went, people bowed, smiled, and flattered, their words polished and rehearsed, as if to reflect the perfection they believed he embodied. Yet behind the glittering surface, Alexander's heart was a fortress of pride. He moved through life with a gaze that measured everything, women, friends, acquaintances, against an impossible standard of beauty, intelligence, and poise. Few could withstand his critical eye, and fewer still dared. To him, charm was merely a performance, and those who sought his attention were players on a stage where he alone held the script. Countless women had attempted to capture his interest with laughter, wit, and the subtle art of seduction, but Alexander remained unmoved. Their compliments, their glances, even their most delicate advances, were met with polite dismissal or outright indifference. He had convinced himself that no one could reach him, that love was a frivolous distraction, and that only he could judge what mattered in the world. Among the glittering guests, the perfumed women, and the carefully curated conversations, there existed a world Alexander rarely noticed, a quiet, almost invisible world of care and diligence. It belonged to the staff who kept his home immaculate, the chefs who prepared meals with devotion, the gardeners who sculpted the estate into perfection, and the servants who moved like shadows through the halls. And there, among them, worked Lily. She was not a figure of grandeur or pretense. She was simple, modest, and graceful in her labor. Every corner she touched shone, every floor she polished gleamed, yet she did so quietly, without expectation of recognition. Her beauty was natural, unadorned, and Alexander, wrapped in his arrogance, rarely even noticed her presence. But fate has a way of disrupting even the most meticulously ordered lives. That summer, as the city basked in long golden days, Alexander began to sense a change in himself. Small, almost imperceptible stirrings at first, an awareness of Lily's movements as she passed him in the hall, the gentle care in her hands as she arranged flowers, the way she seemed content in her work without craving admiration. He began to see her not as a servant, but as a person, and in that realization, something unfamiliar and unsettling took root: curiosity. He found himself lingering longer in rooms where she worked, observing her from a distance, noticing the subtleties of her expression, the sincerity in her gaze. Alexander's life, once a stage of controlled perfection and superficial admiration, began to feel hollow. The women who had once captivated him with beauty now seemed shallow. The opulence of his surroundings suddenly appeared cold and lifeless. And yet, in the presence of Lily, there was warmth, authenticity, and a sense of life he had never known. He began to understand, perhaps for the first time, that true value was not measured by wealth, charm, or appearance, but by heart, humility, and the quiet strength to live with dignity. And so, in the grand mansion of Alexander Hawthorne, amidst gold, crystal, and candlelight, a seed was quietly planted, a seed of something unexpected, something that even a man of such pride and arrogance could not foresee. It was the first whisper of a feeling that would come to unravel his old life, challenge his notions of power and beauty, and ultimately transform him in ways he could never have imagined. Little did Alexander know, his heart, long armored against sentiment, was about to embark on a journey that would teach him the true meaning of love, respect, and devotion, and it would come from the most unlikely source, the quiet, steadfast woman who had been walking through his halls unnoticed all this time. Days turned into weeks, and Alexander found himself increasingly aware of Lily's presence in ways that startled him. It began with simple observations: the way her hands moved with precision as she polished the grand staircase, the soft swish of her dress as she walked through the corridors, the faint, delicate scent of flowers in her hair, carried from the garden. These small details, which he had once ignored as inconsequential, now captured his attention like a magnet. Alexander, who had spent a lifetime controlling every facet of his world, realized, with an unfamiliar unease, that he could not control his fascination with her. He began to watch her from afar, not out of judgment or critique, but with a curiosity that bordered on reverence. There was a dignity in Lily's work, a quiet pride that demanded no recognition, and yet shone brighter than all the chandeliers and gold that adorned his mansion. He noticed the subtle gestures she made to maintain order, the careful way she arranged objects, ensuring that everything was just so. Her focus was absolute, her concentration unwavering, yet she never sought praise. Alexander had never encountered someone so free of pretense, and it unsettled him profoundly. He started seeking excuses to be near her, lingering in rooms she cleaned under the guise of attending to other matters. He found himself engaging her in brief conversation, asking questions about trivial matters, the arrangement of flowers, the temperature of the rooms, even the selection of music played softly in the hallways. Each answer she gave, simple and unembellished, carried a wisdom that struck Alexander with the force of revelation. She spoke with honesty, with clarity, with a gentleness that no woman of his social circles had ever possessed. For the first time in his life, Alexander realized that charm and beauty, the tools he had long relied upon to impress and conquer, were meaningless against the quiet strength of authenticity. Lily, of course, remained largely unaware of the storm she had begun to stir in Alexander's heart. She moved through her tasks with her usual calm, offering only occasional, polite smiles when he spoke to her. Yet Alexander found that each smile, each fleeting glance, ignited emotions within him that he could not name. He began to imagine what her life might be like, beyond the mansion walls, wondering at her dreams, her fears, her quiet joys. He pondered why he, who had everything, had never truly felt the stirrings of the heart that now consumed him. As Alexander's thoughts grew more insistent, he began reflecting on his previous relationships and conquests with a clarity that was almost painful. Women who had once seemed alluring now appeared shallow and unworthy. Their laughter, previously intoxicating, seemed hollow. Their admiration, once a prize to be won, now felt suffocating. He had prided himself on being unattainable, on maintaining control over every social encounter, but in Lily's presence he felt vulnerable in a way he had never experienced. The walls he had built around his heart, strong, tall, and impenetrable, were beginning to crack. One afternoon, as the sun cast golden rays across the mansion's opulent halls, Alexander found himself alone with Lily in the grand library. She was arranging a stack of books with meticulous care, her fingers grazing the leather spines, her brow slightly furrowed in concentration. He watched her for what felt like an eternity, noticing the gentleness in the curve of her hand, the quiet determination in her posture, the faint glimmer of sunlight in her eyes. He felt a sudden, overwhelming desire to speak, to express what he could not yet name, a feeling that was both terrifying and exhilarating. "Lily," he began, his voice uncharacteristically soft, Do you ever wonder why some people are so concerned with appearances?" She paused, looking up, surprised, yet there was no fear in her gaze, only an openness that invited honesty. "All the time, sir," she replied gently. "People often forget what is important. They worry about what others think instead of living truly. I try not to be like that." Her words struck Alexander like a bell tolling in the silence of his soul. He realized that her humility was not weakness. It was strength. Her simplicity was not a lack of ambition. It was a mastery of the heart. In that moment, Alexander felt an awakening, a stirring of emotions that had long been dormant beneath the layers of arrogance and pride. From that day forward, Alexander's thoughts became increasingly consumed by her. He found himself anticipating her presence, longing for the small interactions that had once seemed inconsequential. He began leaving notes for her in unexpected places, small gestures of acknowledgement, though he feared she might never recognize the depth of feeling behind them. He discovered a sense of wonder in observing her laugh quietly to herself while arranging flowers, or in the concentration etched on her face as she polished the crystal chandeliers. Alexander Hawthorne, the proud, unyielding millionaire who had once eschewed love and intimacy as frivolities, found himself trembling under the weight of a feeling he could no longer deny. He was falling in love, not with wealth, not with beauty, not with social status, but with Lily, with the woman who had worked silently at his side, unseen and unappreciated, yet whose presence had begun to illuminate the very core of his being. And so, the stage was set. A silent, growing passion simmered within him, unknown to anyone else in the mansion. Alexander, the master of wealth and control, was learning the most profound lesson of all, that love could not be bought, commanded, or manipulated. Love, he now realized, was something far greater. It was recognition, respect, admiration, and awe for the soul that dared to live authentically. Little did he know that the defining moment, the one that would break the barriers between their worlds forever, was approaching. An event that would test his courage, reveal the true measure of his character, and ignite a love that would change his life for all eternity. The evening had arrived, a night bathed in elegance and extravagance. Alexander had prepared one of his grandest dinners, inviting the city's elite to dine in his glittering mansion. The crystal chandeliers sparkled like captured starlight, their glow reflecting off silver cutlery and porcelain plates meticulously arranged on the long mahogany table. Guests laughed, flirted, and whispered, all eager to bask in the reflected grandeur of Alexander Hawthorne. His girlfriend, Victoria, radiant in her designer gown and dripping with jewels, moved with practiced grace, aware of every eye that followed her. She was confident, poised, and utterly convinced that her charm could bend Alexander to her will. But that night, fate was preparing a lesson that neither she nor Alexander would forget. The dinner commenced with exquisite delicacies, courses arriving with the precision of a symphony, each dish more elaborate than the last. The guests admired the setting, the food, and of course the man of the house. Alexander, though outwardly composed, found his thoughts repeatedly drifting to the quiet presence of Lily, who moved through the halls as usual, tending to every detail behind the scenes. He watched her, hidden behind the veil of propriety, as she refilled glasses, adjusted silverware, and ensured that every guest was attended to without complaint. There was a quiet majesty in her movements, a contrast to the shallow grandeur that surrounded her. And then, the moment came that would change everything. Victoria, in a flourish of arrogance and distraction, gestured animatedly while speaking to a wealthy guest. In a sudden, careless motion, she sent a portion of her dinner flying across the polished marble floor. The rich sauce spread in a vivid, humiliating smear, gleaming under the chandelier lights. The room froze for a heartbeat as all eyes fell upon the accident. Victoria's expression shifted, but not with embarrassment or remorse. Instead, she summoned the staff with imperious authority, directing her gaze toward Lily. "Clean this up immediately," she commanded sharply, her tone sharp and dismissive, as if Lily's purpose existed solely to serve the whims of the privileged. "Now don't just stand there." Lily's hands trembled as she approached, the cloth held lightly between her fingers. Her cheeks flushed with the sting of indignity, yet she did not speak. She had been trained to serve with dignity, yet this command struck deeply, a public reminder of the social hierarchy that Alexander had long maintained without question. The guests murmured in surprise, some hiding smirks behind their champagne glasses, relishing the spectacle of a servant's discomfort. Alexander, however, felt a surge of something he had never experienced before. A heat, a fire that burned away the ice of his pride, surged within him. He could not allow this. He could not stand idly by while Lily, a woman whose quiet strength had already begun to pierce, his heart was subjected to such humiliation. Without hesitation, he rose from his seat, moving with decisive authority to the spot where the mess lay. "No," he said firmly, his voice cutting through the chatter and gasps of the guests. "I will not allow this." He took the cloth from Lily's hands and knelt on the marble floor himself. The act was simple, mundane even, just wiping a smear of food. But in that moment, it was profound. Alexander's eyes met Lily's, and in that gaze, they shared something unspoken yet deeply understood: protection, respect, and recognition. Victoria's face hardened, her surprise quickly morphing into indignation. "Alexander, what are you doing? You don't have to—" "I do," he interrupted, his tone leaving no room for argument. "I will not allow anyone, not even you, to humiliate someone with dignity and honor." The room went silent. The city's elite, accustomed to seeing Alexander as a man of cold perfection, were stunned. Here he was, kneeling on the floor, cleaning a simple spill, and in doing so, revealing a depth of character they had never imagined. Alexander's pride had transformed into empathy. His authority was no longer a weapon of control, but a shield for someone he had come to respect and, unknowingly, to love. Lily, still holding her breath, watched him work. She was accustomed to being unseen, to her labor passing unnoticed, but now she was the focus of his attention, and she felt an unfamiliar warmth in her chest. For the first time, she realized that the man who had seemed so distant and arrogant could possess a heart capable of courage, kindness, and, perhaps, love. As Alexander finished cleaning the mess, he stood slowly, brushing off his hands and ignoring the shocked glances of the guests. He extended a hand toward Lily, a silent acknowledgement of her dignity, of her worth, of the fact that she was no longer merely a background figure in his opulent world. In that moment, a subtle, irreversible shift occurred. Alexander Hawthorne, the man who had scorned love and beauty as mere trifles, felt something stir within him, a mixture of admiration, respect, and an unfamiliar longing that he could no longer deny. For Lily, who had remained steadfast, calm, and graceful under pressure, he realized that she possessed a power far greater than any wealth or social charm, the power to awaken his heart, to illuminate the man he could be beneath the gilded armor of arrogance. The dinner continued, but for Alexander. And Lily, the world had already changed. Every laugh, every whispered comment from the guests, faded into insignificance. His eyes sought hers repeatedly, and in each glance, he discovered a growing truth, that he had begun to fall in love, not with the illusion of perfection, but with the authenticity, courage, and unwavering dignity of the woman he had once ignored. And so, amid the glittering chandeliers, the crystal glasses, and the murmurs of high society, a love story quietly began, one that would soon defy wealth, status, and pride, and reveal the true measure of the heart. After the dinner, the mansion, once alive with chatter and laughter, settled into a quiet stillness. The guests had departed, leaving behind a trail of glittering debris, crystal glasses, half-empty wine bottles, and traces of delicate dishes that no longer mattered. Alexander remained in the dining hall, alone except for Lily, who quietly began clearing away the remnants of the evening. The soft scrape of her hands against the floor, the gentle movement of her body, seemed to echo in the vast emptiness of the mansion. Alexander could not stop thinking about the events of the night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Lily's face, the calm, unwavering strength in her gaze as she had been commanded to clean the spill, the subtle gratitude that had flickered when he took the cloth into his own hands. It was as though in that single, simple act she had revealed a truth that had eluded him all his life. Dignity and grace could be found in humility, and true power lay not in wealth or status, but in the courage of the heart. He wandered through the mansion, passing room after room, yet finding no comfort in the opulence that had once defined his life. The portraits on the walls, the grand furniture, the lavish decorations, all seemed hollow in comparison to the reality he had witnessed. He thought of Victoria, her arrogance and entitlement laid bare that evening, and realized with a jolt that he had been living a life of appearances, valuing charm over substance, beauty over truth. And now, for the first time, he felt the emptiness that such a life inevitably carried. Alexander retreated to his study, sitting behind the massive oak desk that had always symbolized control and authority. But tonight, he felt powerless in a way that was unfamiliar. He reflected on his past relationships, the women he had courted for pleasure or status, and a wave of regret washed over him. None of them had ever moved him as Lily had. None had stirred his soul or challenged him to confront the man he truly was. Her presence was not commanding or manipulative. It was gentle, sincere, and profoundly human. He replayed the dinner scene over and over in his mind. He could see the glint of crystal beneath the chandelier, the red of the sauce on the marble floor, the flicker of surprise in Lily's eyes as he knelt to clean it. That moment had been simple, almost mundane to anyone else. But for Alexander, it had been a revelation. He had glimpsed a version of himself that he had long denied, the version capable of empathy, humility, and love. And he realized, with a sudden clarity, that the woman before him had ignited something in him that could not be extinguished, a love so profound, it terrified him. In the days that followed, Alexander found himself observing Lily with a new intensity. He noticed every subtle movement, the way she held a vase, the way sunlight caught in her hair, the soft cadence of her voice when she spoke to the other staff. Each detail seemed magnified, more beautiful than anything he had ever known. And in those moments, he felt a shift within himself, a dismantling of the arrogance and pride that had long defined him. He began to understand that true connection, true intimacy, was not found in luxury or flattery, but in authenticity, respect, and the courage to see another person's worth. Yet Alexander also grappled with fear. This was uncharted territory for a man who had built his life on control. Could he, who had once dismissed women as mere ornaments, truly embrace a love that demanded humility and vulnerability? Could he break free from the expectations of society, from the chains of status and wealth, to follow the desires of his heart? Every instinct screamed caution. Yet another, more insistent voice whispered of possibility. A life transformed, a heart awakened, a love that could transcend everything he had known. He found himself seeking excuses to interact with her, subtle opportunities to engage, to observe, to protect. Each encounter left him both exhilarated and unsettled, and he began to recognize the depth of his emotions. Alexander Hawthorne, the man who had once regarded love as a frivolity, realized that he was hopelessly, irrevocably drawn to Lily. Her dignity, her grace, her unwavering integrity were not just admirable, they were essential. And with that realization came a determination he had never felt before. He would not allow her to be humiliated, ignored, or diminished by anyone, not even by the woman who claimed his heart before. He began to plan, not in terms of wealth or power, but in terms of protecting her, honoring her, and creating a world where she could be seen and cherished. Alexander felt the stirrings of courage, the kind that comes not from control or dominance, but from love and empathy. The walls of arrogance he had built around his heart were crumbling, and he was not afraid of the vulnerability that awaited him on the other side. In that quiet, vast mansion, Alexander's heart began to change. He understood that life, in all its glittering perfection, had been empty without someone like Lily to share it with. And he knew, deep within, that the path forward would require courage, honesty, and the strength to reject the superficial world he had once so fervently embraced. For the first time, he felt hope that love could be real, enduring, and transformative. Hope that he could be more than a millionaire defined by arrogance and appearances. Hope that he could truly see Lily, honor her, and perhaps find a love that would redefine his very soul. Little did he know that the opportunity to prove this newfound courage would arrive sooner than he expected, in a moment of challenge, humility, and undeniable truth. A moment that would test not only his heart, but the very essence of his character. The days following the fateful dinner were filled with a tension that Alexander could neither ignore nor escape. The memory of Lily's quiet strength haunted him, lingering in every corner of the mansion like a delicate fragrance he could not forget. Yet Victoria, with her calculated charm and relentless ambition, sensed the shift in her partner. She could feel the distance growing, the warmth she had once commanded slipping through her fingers. Her eyes, sharp and predatory, studied Alexander's every move, seeking the slightest indication of continued devotion to her. It was on a late afternoon, when the sun cast long shadows across the grand hallways, that Victoria chose to confront him. She entered his study with a measured grace, her heels clicking against the polished marble, every motion designed to assert authority. Alexander, standing by the window and gazing at the city below, turned slowly, meeting her eyes with a calm he had not yet shown to anyone. "Alexander," she began, her voice smooth but edged with control, "you've been distant. I don't like it. What is going on? Who is occupying your thoughts?" Alexander took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his own truth pressing upon him. For the first time in his life, he refused to play the game of appearances. "Victoria," he said firmly, his voice resonant, "I cannot continue living a life built on superficiality, on manipulation and control. I will not allow anyone, not even you, to belittle or humiliate another human being. And I will not continue a relationship that values charm over character, appearance over authenticity." Victoria's face shifted, her expression a mixture of disbelief and anger. "Are you saying what I did that night meant anything?" she demanded, her voice rising. "It was just a small accident. You don't have to make it into something it isn't. It was never about the accident. Alexander replied, his eyes unwavering. It was about dignity, respect, and the courage to act when injustice is done. I saw Lily, someone I have come to care for deeply, being humiliated by your arrogance, and I could not stand by. I will not be part of a world where people are demeaned for no reason, where cruelty is tolerated because of wealth or status. I am choosing integrity over pretense, and honesty over comfort. Victoria's fury was palpable, but it was laced with disbelief. She had never encountered such defiance from Alexander, never seen him speak with such unwavering conviction. She tried to argue, to twist the situation to her advantage, but Alexander remained resolute. He had discovered a truth far greater than any social expectation, that love, real love, required courage, humility, and the willingness to protect those you care about, even against the world. In that confrontation, Alexander realized something else. He had already made his choice. His heart no longer belonged to the world of wealth and glamour, nor to a woman who thrived on power and manipulation. It belonged to Lily, whose strength had awakened a depth of emotion he had never imagined possible. The clarity of his feelings left no room for hesitation. Victoria could only stand, stunned and speechless, as he turned away from her and toward a future he could not yet fully see, but knew was right. After Victoria left, a profound silence filled the mansion. Alexander walked slowly through the halls, each step measured, each breath heavy with the weight of realization. He thought of Lily, of her quiet courage, her unwavering grace, and her ability to carry herself with dignity in the face of adversity. He felt a surge of protectiveness, an almost primal need to ensure that she would never be humiliated or diminished again, by anyone, ever. Alexander sought her out immediately, finding her arranging flowers in the mansion's greenhouse, the scent of jasmine and roses mingling with the warmth of the late afternoon sun. He approached her slowly, carefully, as if afraid any sudden movement might shatter the fragile moment that had been building between them for weeks. Lily looked up, her expression a mixture of surprise and caution, yet there was no fear, only an openness that invited honesty. "I need to tell you something," Alexander began, his voice low but firm. "You've changed something in me that I didn't know existed. I've spent my life chasing admiration, beauty, and control, but you've shown me what really matters. Your courage, your dignity, your heart. These are what I admire, what I respect, and what I care for deeply." Lily's eyes widened, a blush rising to her cheeks as she tried to process his words. Alexander continued, stepping closer, his gaze unwavering, his voice trembling only slightly with the intensity of his emotions. "I cannot stay with someone who does not honor that truth. I cannot ignore what I feel for you, or the respect I owe to your character. From this moment forward, I am choosing you, Lily. I am choosing what is real, what is honest, and what is worthy of love." For a moment the world seemed to hold its breath. The grandeur of the mansion faded into insignificance. The wealth, the power, the glittering social circles, they were irrelevant. All that mattered was the connection between Alexander and Lily, a bond forged in respect, courage, and an undeniable awakening of the heart. Lily, her hands trembling slightly as she held the bouquet of flowers, finally found her voice. "Alexander, I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't need to say anything," he replied softly. "Just let me show you with my actions that my words are true, that I am here for you, always." And in that moment, amidst the sunlight filtering through the greenhouse, a new chapter began, one defined not by wealth, appearances, or social expectation, but by love, respect, and the courage to follow one's heart. Alexander had made his choice. The path forward was clear, and Lily would walk beside him as the center of his life, no longer unseen, no longer unappreciated, but cherished, protected, and loved beyond measure. In the days that followed the confrontation with Victoria, Alexander found his life transformed in ways he could never have imagined. The mansion, which had once been a palace of appearances and superficial grandeur, now felt alive with warmth, intimacy, and the quiet energy of genuine human connection. Each corner of the house, every shadowed hallway and sunlit room seemed to reflect the new reality that was blossoming within him, a reality where Lily's presence was no longer peripheral, but central, the heart of his world. Alexander sought every opportunity to spend time with her, not out of obligation, but out of a profound desire to understand, support, and cherish her. He would find her in the greenhouse, tending to flowers with her meticulous care, and pause silently nearby, watching the gentle rhythm of her work, marveling at the ease with which she moved through her tasks, and the natural elegance that seemed to radiate from her very being. He observed her interactions with the staff, her kindness, her patience, her willingness to listen, and he felt a profound admiration bloom within him. Lily was not just beautiful, she was extraordinary, and her inner strength illuminated everything around her. As they spent more time together, the walls between them began to crumble. Alexander, who had once been a man of cold calculation, discovered the thrill of vulnerability, the subtle fear and exhilaration of revealing one's heart without pretense. He spoke to Lily not as a millionaire, not as a man of status, but as himself, stripped of all masks, laying bare the deepest recesses of his soul. He confessed the emptiness he had felt in his past pursuits, the hollowness of wealth without love, the futility of charm without connection. Lily listened with patience and compassion, her own heart opening to the man who had, until recently, seemed so unapproachable, so impenetrable. She saw the sincerity in his eyes, the truth in his words, and the courage it had taken for him to break free from the chains of his former arrogance. In turn, she shared her own stories, her own dreams, her fears and joys, her life beyond the walls of the mansion that had once defined her in the eyes of others. Alexander listened as though every word were a revelation, every smile a treasure, and every glance a promise. One afternoon, as the sun streamed through the tall windows of the library, Alexander approached her with a small, delicate gesture. He held out a single rose, its petals soft and perfect, and said, "Lily, I know that words are not always enough, and that gestures can seem small compared to the depth of feeling within, but I want you to know, you are the most important part of my life. I cannot imagine a day without your presence, your laughter, your wisdom guiding me. I love you." Lily's eyes filled with tears, not of sorrow, but of joy and overwhelming emotion. She reached out and took the rose, her fingers brushing against his, and in that simple touch, a world of unspoken understanding passed between them. "Alexander, I never imagined someone like you could feel so deeply, so genuinely," she whispered. "But I see it now. I see you, and I love you too." From that moment on, their connection deepened in ways both subtle and profound. They shared long walks through the mansion's gardens, speaking of hopes, fears, and dreams, quiet dinners where laughter replaced the formalities of high society, and stolen moments in sunlit rooms where words were unnecessary, for their hearts spoke in a language all their own. Alexander discovered joy in simplicity, the warmth of Lily's hand in his, the sound of her laughter, the gentle strength in her gaze. Every day spent with her was a revelation, a reminder that love could transform even the most hardened heart, that beauty without authenticity was meaningless, and that courage and compassion were the true measures of a person. Alexander also began to notice the subtle ways in which Lily had changed him. He found himself less concerned with appearances, less driven by the need to impress, more focused on creating a life of meaning, connection, and integrity. He protected her not as a man asserting power, but as a partner who understood her worth and honored it. When he looked at her, he saw not a servant, not an accessory to his life, but an equal, a companion, and a source of inspiration that had awakened the best within him. The mansion, once a stage for wealth and vanity, now became a sanctuary of love, trust, and mutual respect. Alexander and Lily shared quiet mornings over coffee, discussing trivialities that somehow felt profound, evenings by the fire where words and laughter mingled, and nights in which the silence itself spoke volumes of their connection. Alexander discovered that love was not about possession or control, but about understanding, acceptance, and the joy of being seen and accepted for who one truly was. In these moments he realized that the greatest wealth he had ever known was not measured in gold, jewels, or status. It was measured in the depth of his love for Lily, in the authenticity of their connection, and in the courage it had taken to embrace something real, something meaningful, something transformative. Every glance, every smile, Every whispered word built a foundation for a life that was no longer defined by arrogance or pride, but by the quiet, steady rhythm of two hearts beating in unison. And as their love continued to grow, Alexander understood that he had not only found Lily, he had found himself. In loving her, he had discovered the courage to be vulnerable, the strength to be humble, and the wisdom to cherish what truly mattered. Together they were no longer defined by wealth or status, but by a love that was resilient, unshakable, and infinitely beautiful, a love that would carry them through every challenge, every joy, and every day of their lives. The day dawned crisp and golden over the mansion, a perfect reflection of the new chapter about to unfold in Alexander's life. The events of the past weeks had transformed not only his heart, but the very essence of his world. The glittering halls no longer represented vanity or pretense. They had become a sanctuary where authenticity, respect, and love reigned supreme. Alexander awoke that morning with a clarity he had never known. He would no longer live a life divided between appearances and empty social expectations. His heart had chosen, and he would follow it without hesitation. Victoria, sensing the irrevocable shift, attempted once more to assert herself, to reclaim a place she had already lost. She arrived at the mansion with a veneer of charm, wearing a dress designed to captivate, her every word aimed at persuasion and manipulation. She expected Alexander to falter, to be swayed by her beauty and cunning. But as she entered the grand hall, she immediately recognized the transformation she could no longer control. Alexander's gaze, firm and unwavering, met hers with an intensity that left no room for doubt or negotiation. "I'm done pretending," he said, his voice steady and resolute. "I will no longer allow anyone to diminish or control the course of my heart. You no longer have a place in my life. This ends today." Victoria's mouth opened, but no words came. For the first time, she realized that her charm and influence were powerless against the sincerity of love and the strength of conviction. She turned, defeated, and left the mansion, leaving Alexander standing tall, his heart unburdened, his spirit free. Alexander walked through the familiar corridors, each step echoing the rhythm of newfound freedom, and finally found Lily in the greenhouse, arranging flowers in her serene, unassuming way. The sunlight streamed through the glass, illuminating her hair like strands of gold, and Alexander felt the familiar stirrings of emotion well up within him. Every moment they had shared, the stolen glances, the quiet conversations, the acts of courage, the mutual respect, culminated in this one perfect instant. He approached her slowly, his hands trembling slightly, not from fear but from the overwhelming intensity of feeling. "Lily," he said, his voice rich with emotion, "these past weeks have shown me what truly matters. You have awakened a part of me I never knew existed. You have shown me courage, dignity, and love in its purest form. I cannot imagine my life without you. I want you to be by my side, always." Lily looked up, her eyes glistening with tears, and for a moment, the world outside the greenhouse ceased to exist. She could see the depth of his sincerity, the strength of his conviction, and the transformation that had taken place within him. Slowly she stepped forward, closing the distance between them, and whispered, "Alexander, I've seen your heart. I've seen the man you truly are, and I love you with everything I have." In that moment, Alexander reached for her hands, holding them as though he could convey his entire soul through touch alone. Their eyes met, and in that silent exchange they both understood that their love was not a fleeting passion or a temporary infatuation. It was a bond forged in respect, courage, and the undeniable truth of shared hearts. The mansion, the wealth, the society that had once defined Alexander, faded into insignificance. All that remained was Lily, her presence a beacon of love and authenticity, and Alexander, a man who had finally learned to see, honor, and cherish. They embraced, a long, tender moment that spoke of devotion, protection, and the promise of a shared future. From that day forward, Alexander and Lily walked together as equals, partners, and companions. He abandoned the superficial world that had once ensnared him, freeing himself from the chains of pride and pretense. She, in turn, stepped fully into the life she had transformed, not with ambition, but with integrity, patience, and love. Their days were filled with laughter, mutual respect, and a profound understanding of one another's hearts. The mansion became a home not of gold and crystal, but of warmth and love. They hosted gatherings not for social prestige, but for connection and joy. Alexander continued to thrive in his work, but it was Lily who gave meaning to every achievement, every success, every quiet moment of reflection. Together, they created a life built, not on appearances but on the strength of their love, the courage of their convictions, and the beauty of genuine human connection. And so, the millionaire who had once spurned love, who had looked down upon others and dismissed their worth, discovered the greatest treasure of all. It was not in wealth, power, or status, but in the unwavering gaze of a woman who had held herself with dignity and grace, and who had awakened a heart that had long been asleep. Alexander Hawthorne and Lily, once worlds apart, now shared a love that would endure, a love that would inspire, and a life that would shine brighter than any jewel, chandelier, or gold in the world. Their story, a testament to courage, humility, and the transformative power of love, had reached its beautiful conclusion, proving that even the proudest hearts can be softened, and even the most distant souls can find a love worth everything.